So I put this together with our team because in the conversations I've been having with business leaders and so many different companies of so many different sizes, the two big questions that keep coming up are how do I put AI to work inside my business? Because everybody's excited about it, but it can be hard to think about a business plan that you can actually manage and use it and leverage it and get traction. And some people are focused on adoption, some people are focused on production, some people are trying to integrate it into the revenue and production streams. And business owners, in addition to just asking the question, how do I get it to work? I'm also finding that a lot of the business owners and the principals are champions themselves. They have been hearing about this from their peers. They have been diving into it. They've been working with it themselves, and they're starting to see the potential of what it can do. Maybe they're even using it in their own day-to-day work. You've got champions within your organization, but as often as not, I'm now seeing business leaders themselves being champions. And one of the things they're asking is, how do I get my team as excited about this as I am? How do we start leveraging this? Because they want to build this culture, this AI first posture of we should really be leveraging this tool because it's going to help our organization grow to the next level. Now, when we're thinking through the various levels on this, I'm going to give you a couple of frameworks. And these are the frameworks that we've been talking about with clients for the past probably 18, 24 months on this. And it's starting to gel that we're finding there's a bit of a continuum on this. There are some organizations, and I'm sure there are some of you on the call today, that are just starting out with it. You're using the free tools. You're using ChatGPT, you're using Gemini, you're using Claude. You might even be experimenting with the free version or the web version of Copilot. And there's tons of others. I'm actually subscribed to a couple of newsletters, and every week I learn about 3, 5, 10, 20 new AI things that are out there. And you're just kind of experimenting with it, but you haven't yet figured out, well, what do I really do with this? Or maybe you tried it a year ago, 2 years ago, and it's kind of like, okay, yeah, it's kind of cool, but I'll tell you some of the things that have changed since then and how we're seeing organizations actually leverage it. A lot of organizations today, in fact, maybe most organizations that we're working today, they're somewhere in between in that they've started to maybe subscribe to some company paid licenses. They probably have commercial accounts for some of the big engines, but they're still trying to figure out how do we actually do something with it. And then I'm also working with organizations that are on the leading edge of this, where they're intentionally structuring their organization to be AI first. They're actually using AI adoption and efficiency metrics and automation as a hiring criteria or in role responsibilities and definitions. And it's not because anybody wants to say, hey, I'm going to reduce the size of my organization. They're all coming to the conversation saying, I want to be able to do more. I want to be able to scale up. I want my team to be able to accomplish more and basically be able to handle more business more efficiently, higher quality delivery. And I want to be able to increase my business by 2x, but I only want to have to increase my headcount by 1.1, 1.5, and still deliver a higher quality product throughout the whole process. And that's really where we're seeing AI go as a business tool over the course of the next month, next quarter, next year, and onward. Now, you all have heard about the various models out there, and I do want to provide a great screenshotable thing. We will also provide the slide deck afterwards. But the three big ones that we see over and over again are Microsoft Copilot, because so many of the companies that we work with today are already using Microsoft 365. We're seeing Claude out there a lot, and we use Claude ourselves, as Brian pointed out. And I'm also seeing some ChatGPT, although to a bit of a lesser extent. Copilot is so easy because it's integrated into the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. So if your organization is already using Microsoft 365, and I will talk about the cloud transformation journey, the bits and pieces to get to the point where you can actually leverage AI for what it's capable of doing right out of the box, Copilot is the super easy start. Claude generally is in business, we're seeing it as the biggest mindshare, biggest leader today in innovation, in deep reasoning and logic. And there's a partnership between Microsoft and Anthropic in that Claude is actually accessible inside Copilot. Now, I'll say that Copilot, in general, what I've seen in technology life cycles, Copilot lags about 3 months or so behind what the bleeding edge is, the things that are really catching the headlines of, did you know you could do this? Did you know you could do this? And that's in part because what Microsoft is doing is wrapping the identity and security and data security layers around all the AI offerings that Copilot's leveraging. So like, even though Copilot can use the Claude engine and you could access Claude from within Copilot, you're using a slightly older version, or it's not going to be quite as feature rich or responsive as if you were using Claude directly, but you gain all the organization level benefits of it. ChatGPT is really popular in the personal scene. We're not seeing it nearly as much in business. Anthropic's and Microsoft's partnership has really lifted Claude up as far as its capabilities in business environments. There are certainly cool things you can do with ChatGPT, and there are certainly like image processing, and there are all sorts of branches off from it that it is the leader in. But we're mainly seeing Copilot and Claude in business. And there's a big component to that, which is that bottom line that you see on this comparison table. A lot of businesses go into this and start slapping down in credit cards and saying, we're going to subscribe to that, we're going to subscribe to that, we're going to subscribe to that. We Aldridge are doing the same thing. And everybody's asking the question, how much is this stuff actually going to cost? Because the more you use it, the more expensive it gets, but you don't want to slow down the wheel. You want to make sure that the flywheel keeps spinning faster. Let's do more with it. Well, one of the advantages for Copilot is it's got a flat rate per user for interactive use price model. It's very economical for businesses to get into. And this is not a Copilot presentation. This is an AI presentation. But I would be doing you all a disservice if I didn't say that Copilot is what we're seeing most ready adoption with when organizations are ready to move to the next step, because it does add the security, the data privacy, and a consistent cost model into it. Now, all of these models do have metered consumption-based pricing. Even Copilot does. If you turn Copilot on and you wanted to do things automatically on a scheduled basis or take actions automatically based on events happening, there's a metered model for that. Claude and ChatGPT use metered models even for just the interactive. When you're asking them things, you're typing prompts, they're giving responses, you're using credits on that. And the more complex queries that you use and how you use their various features determines what your actual cost is. And it's pretty typical that your champions and your power users will exhaust the amount of consumption that's built into their particular user account. And so you'll maybe go from a $20 or $30 a month to might even be $100 a month or higher on that. And if you're doing purposeful development, you might be spending $1,000 a month on it. But that's pretty rare, and that's on that high end. Most organizations are spending about $30 to $50 a month per user on these various tools. And a lot of organizations use multiple tools because they're not all the best at everything. And we're seeing a lot of shifts in the industry, a lot of rapid development through the industry. And actually, let me speak about rapid development for a second. If you last used these tools in earnest more than 6 months ago, you're really missing out on 3 big things that have happened just recently, just since 2025. The number one thing is we're now seeing every one of these services have an interactive model memory associated with them. We used to be very concerned about, and I mean, to an extent we still are, session duration. When you're talking to any one of these models, how much context can they remember of your prior interactions with them? And back in 2025, unless you were a developer and you wrote a lot of framework around these things, if you were a typical end user and you were working with one of these models, it only knew as much as maybe you talked about in the last hour or so, or maybe the last 2 or 4 hours. And it was a big deal when they got to 4 hours. And we saw headlines within the tech industry of this now has a context window that's 4 hours long or 8 hours long or 12 hours long. We're now at the point where all these models have a persistent memory option. Copilot, for example, and I'll just call this one out. This is one of the major tools that we use ourselves. I actually loaded my personality profiles into my Copilot for Business. I have a DISC profile, I have an Enneagram profile, I have a predictive index profile, and they all are just PDF files. And I dragged and dropped them into my Copilot for Business session within our data privacy agreement. And I said, these 3 documents describe me keep these in mind in all future interactions that we have. And it said, I've committed those to memory. And I've been able to ask questions later on, a week later, a month later, and it said, you're looking for a fact-based summary. You're looking for quick bullet points. You're looking for the actionable items, and you're not going to want me to expound or invent things, but I will ask clarifying questions about additional things that you might want. And it changed the way that the interactive models have actually worked with me. Claude has the same thing through using projects. You can actually store content in projects within Claude, and the things within the projects maintain context. It also saves some of that consumption-based processing. Those aren't the only two models that have interactive memory, but that's something I'm super excited to see, because it means that you actually are getting closer and closer to the concept of being able to have an AI assistant that you're able to train, that develops skills, that's learning along with you and takes your feedback and can incorporate it later on. The next big thing that we're seeing, last 6 months now, granted, this has been happening for years, but this is really becoming accessible now, is integration. Platform integrations and model context protocols, which started as just a one model standard, has now become the standard, MCPs. An MCP is a description file that tells an AI model, how do you access this application? How do you access this data? How do you take these actions? By packaging it up like that, there are now libraries of MCPs online for common web applications or common services that you can point these models to say, I need you to go connect to this MCP and then connect to this service. And suddenly the model knows how to work with that data. And that connection is making a huge difference. And that last bit, accessibility. These things were all possible years ago, but it required development effort to do it. You had to use development tools, you had to write code to do it, and granted, AI made that easier over time. We're now in 2026, we're in the age of no-code end user development tools. You literally open up an AI window and you write what you would like it to do, and it will go and build the back end for you. You still have to be a logical thinker. You still have to be methodical in how do you write your instructions? How do you get to the output that you want? And you still have to provide feedback and refine it. There is still effort involved in it, but you don't have to be a programmer to do it. Those are three big things that have changed just in the last year. So as you're driving adoption, you will encounter some people that will say, hey, I tried it and it just couldn't do this. Just know these features are all available today, and they're commonly part of today's models in commercial environments. As you're driving that maturity within your organization, we try to think of various stages along the way. At the first, there's a lot of individual experimentation. And honestly, most people start out here. You start playing with the tools. You go visit ChatGPT, or you go visit Claude.ai, or you visit the Copilot free web search, and you just start asking questions on it. And a lot of times people start using it like it's a supersized Google. They use it like a search engine. But the real light bulb comes on when you start asking questions that require a little bit more research or a little bit more development. And it really comes on when you start iterating on it and you realize, wait, whatever the response that I got was, I can then offer refinements. I can clarify, I can narrow in and actually have a conversation with the tool. But it all starts with that individual experimentation and the awareness, that growing skill set of, I understand how to interact with these engines. Prompting is becoming a real skill. Logical thinking has remained and will remain a very strong skill. We then move up to that next stage, which is great. It knows what I'm providing, or maybe what files I'm dragging and dropping into it. The next step is, let's get it connected to your actual business data. If, for example, if you're further along on the cloud transformation journey and you're a Microsoft 365 subscriber, if you have your files and your content stored in SharePoint and OneDrive, Copilot immediately has access to all of that, and it still respects user permissions and data privacy along the way. If you have line of business applications, we use HubSpot, for example. There are connectors, there are MCPs that are pre-built where we can say, Claude, I need you to work with HubSpot data. Copilot, I need you to go work with HubSpot data. And that then gives them all this additional context. I can start using business vocabulary And as I'm writing these prompts and trying to get details out of these AI engines, I'm not having to tell it all the context every single time. It's extremely powerful to connect those to your individual pieces of data, to your applications, to your files, to your correspondence, to even your team's instant messaging. Stage 3, we go to the next level and we go beyond data, and now we connect to an actions universe. This is where automation and AI can really start to do things in your environment that are more than just giving you an output or a file that you click on to download. What if it actually was able to write that file into the place where your organization's working? What if it was actually able to go into HubSpot or some other SaaS application and update data based on what you've told it you want to change? Imagine being able to say, I need to update all of these territories over to this, or I need to reassign this, or I need to break this geography down this way. Great, now go make that change in my application. Now, there's a lot of security considerations, as you can imagine, when we get to the point where AI is working with actions, but that's the next major step. And I'll call out, it doesn't have to be that big, because at the individual user basis, for those of you using like Microsoft Outlook, you are already familiar with how to use rules in Outlook. You can set up autoresponders, you can set up things that move messages between folders. Those basic automations we're seeing get more and more connected with AI components. You can go over to the Copilot side panel in Outlook and say, every time I get a message like this, I want you to take the following actions, which might include replying with another message. AI can actually create that rule for you and then take those actions automatically. So there's some, it's not training wheels, but there's some stepping stones along the way where even individual users can start to leverage these in fairly secure application-specific ways in environments that they're already used to working with. For the organizations that have really taken it to the next step or that are on the leading edge of this, they're really looking to say, how do we create organization-managed autonomous processes? These are organization things that are then either tied into their service delivery or their revenue delivery or their personnel management or their growth or their training and learning and service quality, all of those things. The organizations that we're working with are actually saying, wait, great, the individual experimentation is wonderful. How do we do this at scale and actually make this part of how we operate as a business? And that requires several stages of maturity along the way. Now, as I mentioned, we start with the individual experimentation. Use AI for everyday tasks. The real challenge there is that everything is staying siloed. Now, the key thing that you need to do as business leaders to get this stage successful is establish some use guidelines. Give a framework about what's acceptable to use. Encourage people to use them. Sign up for commercial accounts for these. You do not want people just going out and using free individual accounts with your business data. You lose control of your business data at that point. So it's critical that your organization is choosing, you know what, everybody gets this subscription. Maybe that's Copilot. And our power users and our champions might have a second subscription. Maybe they get Claude so they can experiment with that. And maybe we'll have a couple of connections to some of our data as we get a little bit further along. And here's an acceptable use policy for AI. And I'll talk a little bit about the framework that we use even within Aldridge, a traffic light system that you can help frame that conversation within your own companies. The next step is to get it connected to your data. And again, we want to avoid having to start every conversation from scratch. These language models really come alive as business tools when they speak your vocabulary and they have that context. Now, building these connections, there's really two approaches that I've seen for these. A lot of these AI models try to make it super easy for the end user to just create a connection. There are some security considerations with that I'll talk about a little bit later. We're seeing some challenges with it. Another way to do it is to build company level connections from the administrator portals for these devices. It does take a little thought and a little expertise, but it's the same sort of cybersecurity consideration that you've all already been thinking about everybody needs their own user account. Where's the data get stored? Who has access to what? We don't want to forget the basics. When we're talking AI, we don't want to throw those aside, but we also don't want to slow this down. So we're helping organizations put these connectors in place so that it can actually get back to the data in a safe and secure way that's trustworthy. The next step beyond that, that enabled applications and access, or I'm sorry, the enabled applications and the actions. I'm going to focus on those three questions over on the right. Again, from a security standpoint, before we enable AI or automation to be able to do things on people's behalf, we need to ask those three questions and make sure that we're comfortable with the answers. What privileges does this really need? Again, the default of a lot of these models when you first connect them up to something is, I get access to everything because, of course, you might ask me anything. Therefore, I need access to everything. Well, does it really need access to everything? There's risk associated with that. What if somebody puts a prompt in that has an error in it or makes a change to data that is very difficult to roll back or fix? More importantly, then, how will its actions be monitored? All of these services have some level of administrative logging. The way those connections are established determines how detailed of logs we have. We have to consider what the target applications they're going to be working with already have in place for security monitoring. We're already monitoring things like your email for threat actor activity. AI activity can look very suspicious as well, so it's important that all of those layers are working together and it's integrated in. It's not scary, it just requires appropriate consideration. And then lastly, what are the control boundaries? If the AI or automation does something that is outside what you're expecting, how do you know? Who responds to it? How do you shut it down? One of the challenges with AI and automation, especially with how easy these things can be adopted, is once you start opening the door to the AI being able to take actions, it is possible that the AI could take actions that you didn't intend. And it can be especially difficult if you have, say, 10 champions in an organization of 40 people, and they're all creating AI automations, and things start happening. Whose automation is actually causing the problem? So it's important to maintain, call it a registry or an inventory of what AI and automations have you put in place, so that if something does go haywire, you can trace it back to the one that's doing it. But more importantly, you have a kill switch that's predefined. You know how to shut the automations off. It's a great base rule to create and say, you know what? I want my team to be able to do these things. But before I permit you to turn that on, I need you to show me the document that tells me how to kill it if we have to, even if it's just for troubleshooting. That leading edge is then tying all of those pieces together to where you've got a governance universe, you have a data universe, and you have an actions universe that are all managed and working together. And now you can get to the point where those become part of critical business processes. You've probably, at that point, you might have AI and automation developers or an administrator or maybe even a VP of AI or something similar to that, where you've actually built that maturity up and you're now managing it to the point where it can be part of your core business processes. Now, the adoption curve for something like this, and I'll use the Copilot example, frequently looks like this. You've got the quick wins in the lower left-hand corner, those quick experimentation. And as you move up the curve, you gradually get up to the point where you're at organization managed autonomous processes. The enabling initiatives over on the right-hand side, if you start from the bottom and you just start adding those enabling initiatives, that's a framework that you can use within your organization to say, wait, our step to the next level looks like this. Our step to the next level looks like this. And your return on investment grows the deeper you get into it. The effort grows along the way as well. It's harder to do organization managed autonomous processes than it is to do rapid individual experimentation, but the rewards for it can be greater when it's done well. Now, breaking this whole curve down into three big chunks. The quick wins, lower left-hand corner. The middle of the curve, those are your experimenter and champion-led wins. And then up on top, that's your mature development. And right in the middle, if we follow that across, organizations that are further along in cloud transformation have an easier time moving higher up the curve because you've already got cloud-based identity, cloud-based security, cloud-based content management, cloud-based resources, cloud-based applications. All of that makes it super easy to connect these things appropriately and securely into these large language models. There still is an argument for running some of these models locally on your own equipment, on your own computers. That is wonderful for experimentation, for rapid development, because after all, you can throw as much compute hardware as you want on it, and you control the costs, and it's running in a sandbox. It can't go outside those boundaries. But that's a difficult thing to then scale up into production and still take advantage of what the current models are. So there's a continuum of ways to do this, but cloud transformation is usually an important middle stepping stone there, the moment you want to go beyond real individual experimentation. So what are we going to watch for from a risk standpoint as business leaders? How do we not forget all the lessons of cybersecurity that we already have ingrained within our organizations to manage our risks? So make sure that you set your pace of adoption consistent with what your organization risk tolerance is. If you are a compliance or regulated industry, you're going to have a lower risk tolerance for AI. That doesn't mean you can't use it. I was talking with an organization that is in a regulated industry, and we evaluated, actually we had a conversation about the various models, and they ended up going with Microsoft Copilot in this case because it had the strongest corporate data privacy and governance, and it had the consistent security and identity. They gave up that, okay, it's going to be about 3 months behind whatever the leading edge is going to be, but it keeps us compliant for our commitments to our customers and to our industry. I have other groups that have said, look, I have this group that has no compliance requirements, no regulated data. They're not working with any private information. They're not working with any, proprietary information of the organization. They're just experimenting to see what's possible. Set them up in a sandbox, turn them loose with the latest and greatest models. Let's see what they can come up with. And as you integrate that into your business workflows and processes, the models that they're using, those leading edge models, maybe even bleeding edge models, have probably become available with a higher level of security maturity from a different offer that can now be integrated and you can accomplish the same thing. So you can bring that innovation back into mainstream. The second key point, again, from a security posture, you all know this, account identities remain key. Every user on your network hopefully has their own username and password. Every AI system on your network should have its own username and password. Do not use your same usernames as what you use for your automated processes, because the real risk there is you can't differentiate between the two. And lastly, make sure you've got that report and management in place. So let's dive just a little bit more into each of these risks. And I want to be sure to land these for you because it is so easy to forget everything that we've learned over the last 20 years in cybersecurity in our excitement in going about AI. So risk number one, remember, those AI agents, the rapid LLM setups, they will always say, hey, I'll connect you to the service, just give me your credentials. Or I can do that for you, just give me your credentials. And your credentials are now stored inside the AI agent. What you or your employees have just done is given a key to someone or something that you don't control, and it now acts on behalf of somebody else. An example that I've used with some clients to just emphasize the risk there, imagine if one of your employees, without your knowledge, made a duplicate of their office key or their office badge and handed it to somebody that they found on Craigslist, and they asked that person from Craigslist, you know what, I'm not going to go into the office on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays, but here's a copy of my key. I need you to stop by my desk, pick these files up, bring the files to me, and oh, I might have a couple of other things to drop off. You'd be really upset. One of your employees just gave a copy of their key to a third party that you have no visibility and control of, and worse, the logging of the office, if you're using badges, it looks like your employee has clocked in and out. That same risk exists if your employees are just using their own credentials for AI tools. So the two solutions for this are, number one, in a mature approach, whenever we need to establish connections to data or to actions, we set up service accounts that are specific to those AI processes, and every AI process has its own account. That also makes it very easy to track. It makes it easy to log what's happening, and it makes it easy to kill the process if we have to. It keeps all the security intact, and we can set those service accounts up in such a way that they can only work for that process, and it reduces the surface area. Another way to approach it is to only use corporate managed connections versus individual connections. Most of these tools at the enterprise plan levels let administrators maintain a roster of approved pre-configured connections to data and actions, and those become available in the model. And all the user has to say is use that connection. And the model then will use impersonation to use the user's privileges to go access content, or if the connection is set up to do so, it will use a pre-configured service account of limited access, just the permissions that it needs, to go do what it's capable of doing within its defined boundaries from your administrators. So 2 ways to handle that. We just want to avoid situations where we're taking the easy path in a production environment of giving an AI tool the user's credentials because we just need to solve the problem. We also want to make sure that we're thinking about the permissions that go around what those service connections, what those accounts can do. Just like with people, we're giving privileges into the environment. And so we have to think, what are the actual privileges that that account needs to accomplish its goal? It can be real easy to say, give it full administrator rights, because of course it's going to work if we give it full administrator rights. But of course, you wouldn't give people in your own organization full administrator rights within your environment because you know that's too much. It's more than they need to have, and it introduces risk for your organization, which then makes things like logging and monitoring and the ability to shut down quickly that much harder. So don't forget the basics on cybersecurity. Now, how do you talk about this and still encourage AI adoption in your organization? Well, something that we've adopted internally is a traffic light framework. We use green light, yellow light, and red light. Green light, we encourage experimentation. As long as you are not using any of our data, you're not using any client data, you're not using any secure data, we want you to go experiment, go try things with these tools. And you have very, very little reporting requirements to go use those tools and try things out. We're encouraging experimentation. We're providing training on experimentation because we want people to be comfortable with it and really think through, ooh, this is possible. Now, as individual people build tools and think about, oh, I've got a repeatable set of instructions here. These are really cool. I'm going to share this with my team. You're starting to build some business dependencies around what that champion and what that one person has built. At that point, we move it into the yellow light zone, and we start to put a little bit of internal IT oversight around it, where at least we don't have to manage it, but our internal IT team is aware that it's there, because now it's becoming part of the tool set for that team, and a new person joining that team also needs access to that tool set. And if the tool set breaks, it shouldn't have to be wholly on the author, the original author, to fix it. It might be somewhat on our internal IT team or our security team to be able to say, is it doing what it needs to do? And we also, at that point, we have documented processes to know how to kill it. If it goes off the rails, we have sensors in place to say it's out of bounds. We know how to shut it down. Lastly, if it becomes beyond the team and it becomes business critical, we move it into what we call the red zone. Red zone is only managed by our internal IT and security teams. At that point, the author is still a contributor. They're a consulting resource, they're a refinement resource, but it is now owned as an application of the business with the same levels of consideration about lifecycle management, security control, operating state, and health. You can use this same model in your organization, even if you don't have red light items yet, to give people clear guidance that, look, I want you to experiment. I want you to live in that green zone. And as you develop things, and as you find that you want to share those, we can start to move them into the yellow zone to give you a little bit more support in doing the right thing in the structure, so that not everybody has to be an expert about all the controls that need to go around as it becomes more important to your business. That's the first step in building an AI culture, is providing that leadership about how do you get people to adopt these things. Yes, you'll have self-starters in your organization. Yes, you will have people that are already experimenting with it. Yes, you will have new people that come in that start trying things in new ways. By being a leader on this and setting some framework around it, you can be most successful with it within your own organization. To minimize the friction on it, the number one thing is make sure that you're connected to your identity service. A lot of organizations that we're working with today are using Microsoft 365 as their user identity service. It is really powerful to make it where users don't have to sign into one more thing. The major engines, Copilot's natively integrated in Microsoft 365. Claude supports single sign-on. ChatGPT, I believe, is now supporting single sign-on as well in their enterprise plans. Connect it back to your user identity so your users don't have to keep track of multiple usernames and passwords, but also so that you have some visibility to what those tools are doing, and even in that green zone. Number two, get it connected to your data. Don't rely on individual users to build ad hoc connections for things that are moving from green into yellow. Those individual tools, then shifting up into team work group productivity tools, or, hey, this is really cool, I'm going to share this. A lot of people should try it, but you don't want to share it if it's still the original author's credentials that are tied into it. So start as an organization planning out how to get it connected to your data. Those are things that we can help with. And then lastly, give that shared workspace. Start setting up areas where people can collaborate, where they can share the wins, where they can share the tools, where they can say, I built this and I want a lot of people to be excited about it as well, and here's how we publish it. Get it out there. One of the easiest things to do for creating that shared workspace is to just build a culture of sharing of, look, I built this prompt. Here's a Word document of exactly the instructions that I use. Now, all I do is drag and drop that Word document into my language model. It's real easy to share that Word document with 10 or 100 people in your organization. They can all drag and drop that Word document into an interactive LLM and get basically the same results. Somebody wrote the checklist and the instructions just as a document. It can be that simple to share it. You really do want to share those prompts that are working well. And as a leader, you want to make sure that you're encouraging those wins and those shared successes. You're going to find that there's lots of experimentation because as one person, you're not going to know all the interesting, inspiring, or imaginative things that people are going to try with these tools. You don't know exactly where the wins are going to be. Honestly, we're all working to figure that out exactly. Granted, as you move up the maturity scale, there are certainly ways to measure ROI and time savings and plan out, look, we're going to put an AI process in place for this, and we expect that this is going to enable us to do twice as much or 5 times as much or 10 times as much of this task that occurs 100 times a month, and therefore we expect that we're going to save X amount of dollars from the time reduction, but we'll still have the same or higher capacity. There are ways to do that, but it just starts with making sure people can spin around in their chairs and say, let me show you something cool that I did. The most mature organizations that I'm seeing make it part of their weekly meetings. They make it part of their employee reviews. They make it part of all the way from the company leaders of saying, let me show you what we're accomplishing with this, and here's how we're enabling you to be able to do the same thing, and supporting people through that. Now, supporting people through that, you've got, as owners, the way you can track the adoption on these tools. I'll show you what one of the Copilot reports looks like on this. You can only manage what you can track. So there are tools in all of these platforms that you can see who your busiest users are, who your most popular applications are, the types of activities they're doing. Some of these tools do give you visibility about the prompts that people are using. Some of the more advanced tools from a compliance requirement let you do a discovery search to go actually pull back prompts and see the results that happen, although usually most of these engines don't surface it to that detail. But there are tools that let you do that. But you need to be able to see the overall trends so that you can, I don't want to use the term cheerlead, but cheerlead and celebrate the wins, but also identify, are there teams or are there individuals that are falling behind on this curve? They're having a harder time adopting it. Do we need to do additional training? And ultimately, as you move higher on that maturity scale, you start to think about, let's bring specialists into this. We now have hurdles that we need to clear. We need to do specialized connectors or do custom development, or we need to start putting appropriate controls around something that's shifting from yellow zone up into red zone. That's the time we really start bringing specialists into play to say, we need connectors set up securely to do this. We need controls. We need monitoring. We need kill processes around the appropriate things that we're setting up for AI and automation. These are the ways that you support your team's leaders. Now, Copilot, as an example, and it's one of the biggest ones that we use, has all this reporting that's built into it. You can go visit that URL that's right there on the left side of the page and get all of these insights about who are your most active users, how often are they doing it. This actually pulled this from Aldridge. This is within the last 30 days of our internal Copilot activity. We have about 120, 140 people in the organization overall. We have Copilot actively rolled out to 48 of those people. We have 47 of them that are using it each month within the last 30 days. I'll have to find out who the one is that we have a license for that they haven't actually used it. But on average, the people that are using Copilot, 186 prompts per month on this. And we're getting great adoption as we're showing people what it's capable of and as we're building more connections to it. I've got a similar report for Claude that echoes a lot of this on. And there's some overlap too in that we have other AI tools that are more yellow zone, red zone, even beyond Copilot, where we're integrating AI and automation into things like knowledge management and service delivery and consistency and reporting so that we can help our own team do more in the same amount of time and deliver a higher quality with less effort. We're just looking to be able to use all of these tools to scale up. And I think when we built a list of AI tools that we're using today, I think there were like 10, maybe 15 items on the list. Copilot's one of them, Claude's one of them, but we have a number of other specialized tools that fit within particular applications or areas of service. Now, one of the things that I'm helping organizations work with, and we are at bottom line, we are technology partners for all of our customers that we're working with. And when we come into these AI conversations, I'm both sharing what I'm seeing the successes are with other organizations. Here's where the wins are. I'm sharing the challenges of what we're seeing. Oftentimes, we're going back to the basics and saying, let's make sure that we've got the foundations of cloud transformation in place so that you're actually ready for AI initiatives. It's wonderful to go from 0 to 100 miles an hour. That's a great dream and so forth. And some organizations manage to pull it off with a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. It is much more predictable to take a steady approach and say, let's get our cloud-based identity. Let's get cloud-based file services, cloud-based security, get all those pieces in place so that we can turn on these AI tools and enable those individual experimenters and champions to be successful in a secure and reliable framework. We also have platform development capabilities where we can establish connections to data. We can put these automations in place. And some of these things, while a lot of this has gone to no code and low code development with very accessible tools, some of it still requires some fine tuning and some wiring up behind the scenes. We do have development teams specifically for that to be able to say, let's put a mature controlled process in place for this. I love the prototype, good proof of concept, good initial adoption. Let's take it to the next level. Let's drive it. And more importantly, we can drive that adoption support. By doing all of the things that we're talking through here, you're lowering the bar, but you're holding the security line for your organization to do the right thing and make these AI tools accessible to people. Whether it's security, whether it's management, whether it's training, whether it's just sharing the wins, we're here to be able to help with that. As Brian mentioned at the start, I probably have this conversation 5 to 10 times a week, or a variation of this conversation. And I really wanted to be able to bring this to all of you because honestly, I think this is so exciting with what we're seeing in technology today. It's so relevant to so many businesses that we're working with that I would love to see each of you take some piece of this back and say, we're at this step and we know what the next step is. And if the next step is not yet determined, happy to help out. We've got a strong team of people that can certainly get engaged and help you figure out where you're at in this journey. And we're really eager to help you get a little bit further along too.